Do want to get to another big story that we have been covering here over the past couple weeks at this point. New information does continue to emerge in the murder of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. The man accused in the fatal shooting, Luigi Mangione, could be transported from Pennsylvania to New York City as early as Tuesday to face a murder charge. The information provided by Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, who said the 26-year-old could waive extradition, meaning he would give up his right to a hearing on the issue and be moved over to New York. Multiple media outlets, including ABC News, allege via sources that Mangione may have traveled by train out of New York City after the murder rather than bus, which is what was originally assumed. The New York City Police Department has not confirmed that to be the case, though. We're keeping in touch with them for updates. Now, NYPD Chief of Detectives Joseph Kenney did reveal that Mangione was not a client of UnitedHealthcare, but mentioned the insurance company in a note found with him during his arrest at a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania, about 230 miles from the crime scene. The city's police commissioner told reporters a gun found on Mangione during his arrest matches shell casings that were found at the site of the shooting, seen right there in that video. Mangione does remain jailed in Pennsylvania without bond, where he was arrested on gun and forgery offenses. As I mentioned, he could potentially be moved over to New York very soon. So much to discuss as always, so I do want to bring in Jillian Snyder, a former NYPD officer. She's also the policy director of R Street's Criminal Justice and Civil Liberties team and an adjunct lecturer over at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us and help break it all down.
Thanks, Josh.
Of course. Well, first off, one of the questions that a lot of people have asked is related to that witness that was in the video, the surveillance video that we just showed you, who kind of runs off to the side. I did want to ask you and get your take. Is it likely that police are trying to track down that person, and do they need to track down that person?
Absolutely, they would be looking for this witness. I'm sure they are looking for anyone that was in that general vicinity that morning. And I'm also sure that they are looking for anyone that may have been on Mangione's escape route. At this point, with the evidence that the NYPD as well as other law enforcement agencies have collected, having corroboration from witnesses is important, but I do think the amount of evidence they have so far is outstanding. They will be looking for these witnesses, but I don't think that having that person is critical to the case at this point.
From what we know about Luigi Mangione, he was an Ivy League student. He's now accused, as you know, of murder. How does someone, and again, he is innocent until proven guilty, but how does someone go from, let's say, an Ivy League student to what would appear to be a calculated assassin based on what police are saying?
Well, looking at it through a criminological lens, I teach criminology at John Jay College. So often what we do is we try and dissect the motivation or the criminogenic behavior of someone who commits crime. In this case, it's not very typical for someone of this person's background. What we know thus far, he's 26. He comes from a well-to-do family. He's never been in trouble with the law, to my knowledge. Ivy League educated, very smart. His crime and the way in which he carried out his crime also shows us that he's calculated and sophisticated to an extent, but it is very atypical for someone of his age and background to wake up one morning and commit a crime like this. But what people are speculating is due to his health injury or his back injury. That could have been something that caused this stressor or this strain, and that is what led him to ultimately carry this out.
One thing we were mentioning here off the top is that Bragg, the Manhattan DA, does say it is possible that essentially Mangione could give up that extradition fight and go there back to New York. I did want to get your take here on whether it makes the investigation maybe a little more complicated when you have different jurisdictions that are involved, especially when you're talking about two different states, because the crime happened in New York City, and then you have over in Altoona, Pennsylvania, that is where the suspect was arrested. So does that make it any more difficult?
It spreads out the jurisdictional area that law enforcement will now have to scour through for additional evidence. In terms of logistics and legality, it doesn't make it that much more difficult. There are many criminals who commit a crime somewhere and they cross state lines and eventually will need to be extradited. In this case, all week, what we've heard is Mangione's attorney was saying he was not going to waive extradition originally and that he was going to plead not guilty to all charges. I have heard recent updates that his lawyer may be considering, like you said, either waiving the extradition hearing because it looks like the governor is going to sign off on a warrant to bring him back to New York. No matter what, though, he's held in on bond in Pennsylvania for the forgery charges, for the possession of a weapon charge, as well as the silencer, and then he's facing murder 2 charges here. So at this point, I don't really think logistically it's a challenge for the NYPD or law enforcement. It's just prolonging the process.
When you were working with the NYPD, did you ever experience a crime of this magnitude? Obviously, there is crime there in New York City, but did you ever see something like this kind of play out?
I worked in Brooklyn and the Bronx over the course of my career, so I unfortunately did see a lot of murder, but I never saw a murder to this extent. Most of the crime of murder that I dealt with was either a retaliatory crime, a gang-related crime, a narcotics-related crime, but in most situations, both the offender and the victim were known to each other. Of course, I did see random acts of violence where someone was killed, but I never saw something like this carry out where an individual chose a target that he did not know, had no prior relationship with, but instead sought him out for his specific mission.
For people who are maybe not familiar with Midtown Manhattan, we've talked a lot about it, you and I here over the last week or so. Can you describe to people really what that area is like? I'm going to pop up an image here showing right outside the Fox Studios in New York, which isn't too far away necessarily. Can you explain Midtown Manhattan and just the area in general?
So that area, like I said last week, it covers 43rd Street on the south end all the way up to Central Park, and then it covers from Lexington Avenue all the way to the Hudson. So it's a relatively large in size jurisdiction. It's one of the most populated in terms of tourism. We have Rockefeller Center. I was actually down at Rockefeller Center yesterday for another interview, and I could tell you there were thousands of people, especially this time of year, coming in to see the Christmas tree. But on top of that, you have the theater district, you have restaurants, you have hotels. So it's not only residentially populated and very condensed office buildings, but you have a high level of tourism and visitors. In terms of crime, though, the crime numbers this year are a little different than years past. There have been an increase in robberies in that area, but they're not on par with the rest of the city. If you look at it in comparison to 4 years ago, we are doing much better. But again, you will see a lot of security, heightened NYPD presence at this time of year because of the tree.
One thing that was interesting is our Fox 5 New York station obtained a photo of a bag of bullets that was found dumped in Central Park. Now, initially, it sounded as though police were investigating to see whether or not this was connected to the fatal shooting of Brian Thompson, but later determined it was not. But one thing that stood out to me is police had said, we find bullets like this quite a bit there in Central Park. How often is that happening, that police or other people there are stumbling upon bullets in Central Park?
Crazily, you will find a lot of things in Central Park. It's the largest park we have, and we see a lot of people randomly walk through it. You could cut across town by going through the park, driving through the park. It is not rare to find bullets. I found bullets on the streets in the Bronx on a routine basis, but in Central Park, I will tell you, you will find a lot of crazy things.
As far as where things go from here, can you break down what police, and again, you're not involved, of course, in this investigation, but can you break down what it's likely NYPD and other law enforcement are doing behind the scenes? Because they've released so much information here, but obviously they have to keep a lot under wraps as well. So what is likely going on behind the scenes?
Well, we know that the NYPD and other law enforcement officials were trying to speak to the Mangione family and any extended relatives that he has. At this point, it looks like they have been unsuccessful. My assumption is the family has retained counsel and have been advised to not speak to law enforcement. But other than that, we know that law enforcement agencies are going to be scouring Mangione's entire life. They're going to be looking into where he worked, where he went to school, his landlord that I know made comment to police already. They're going to talk to friends. We know that there was a gap in the time period from the last time he spoke to his family till currently. So we know that they're going to be trying to piece together what was going on during that time. But more importantly, they're going to look at how did someone like this at this age, which is very uncommon to just wake up and become a murderer. They're going to try and find what was that trigger point in his life that caused him to commit this crime.
A last question for you here. What kind of question or questions do you maybe hope will be answered? Again, a lot of this does have to remain under wraps, though police have released a lot of information. So what question or questions do you hope are going to be answered to the public, us included here, in the near future?
Well, as you said earlier, the NYPD has already released that Mangione was not a client of UnitedHealthcare. So with that being said, obviously he has some animosity towards the healthcare industry, but what in particular caused him to carry out this crime on this victim? So I think that's like the most pressing question that everyone's going to want to know.
All right, Jillian Snyder, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and help break it down. Obviously, a lot of developments here and a lot of information still left to figure out. Is there anything else you want to add before I let you go?
No, I just want to say that the public did an amazing job, particularly that worker at McDonald's. I said last week on the show, if you see someone that you think may even slightly resemble this suspect, call it in, allow law enforcement to do their job and rule out a suspect. But if you see something, always say something.
All right, Jillian, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Josh.
And I do want to talk a little bit more about the case, as we do have another update in the murder of Brian Thompson. The FBI now confirming the San Francisco Police Department first provided the tip to the FBI that helped to identify Luigi Mangione as the suspected gunman days before that arrest took place over at McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Our Fox 2 San Francisco team spoke with the FBI's New York office, the Bureau confirming that a San Francisco police investigator recognized photos of Mangione from a missing persons poster after the 26-year-old's mother reported him missing last month. The investigator provided the tip to the NYPD on the day of the shooting. It's not clear if Mangione was ever in San Francisco, though. Now, he did reportedly work for a company called TrueCar, which is based over in Santa Monica, but at one point did have an office in San Francisco. That office, we're told, is now permanently closed. Jessica Formoso with our Fox 5 New York team has more on the situation developing there out of San Francisco.
The San Francisco Chronicle reporting that 4 days before Luigi Mangione was arrested, a San Francisco police officer contacted the FBI, telling them one of their officers recognized Mangione after seeing these surveillance photos the NYPD had released of the suspect. Mangione's face was known to the San Francisco PD because his mother had reported him missing less than a month before he allegedly gunned down UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson outside the Hilton Hotel in Midtown. The FBI says it passed along the information to the NYPD. However, after the suspect was arrested on December 9th in Pennsylvania, the NYPD said they did not have Mangione's name before his arrest. Fox 5 reached out to the FBI. It issued this statement saying, in part, a tip was received from the San Francisco Police Department regarding the possible identity of the suspect. FBI New York conducted routine investigative activity and referred this and other leads to the New York City Police Department as part of our assistance to them in their investigation, stopping short of saying whether it shared the tip about Mangione's identity with the NYPD before or after his arrest. A top law enforcement official is now telling Fox 5 the information the FBI gave the NYPD about Mangione's identity was among hundreds of tips, including from other law enforcement, and the NYPD followed up on those leads. Michael Alcazar is a retired NYPD detective.
If the FBI is giving you a tip, that should be your number one. I mean, you should investigate all leads, but if the FBI is giving you, hey, yeah, we have a missing person, and an investigator, I said, that looks like the guy that we have missing, I would run with that before any other unvetted tip from like a civilian, calling a Crime Stoppers tip.
Meanwhile, Mangione is being held in Altoona and could waive extradition to New York City as early as Tuesday.
Indications are that the defendant may waive, but that waiver is not complete until a court proceeding, which my understanding from court officials in Pennsylvania cannot happen until Tuesday. So until that time, we're going to continue to press forward on parallel paths.